Distinguished delegates all, I greet you from my beautiful country, Barbados. You've asked me to deliver this keynote address on narrowing the digital divide, supply, demand, investment, and innovation. I'd like us, however, to have a conversation because the IIC has had a critical role to inform and help shape global policy agenda for ICT and the digital ecosystems. In that role, you must always be mindful of the impact of technological innovation on society, and there's a need for us to openly evaluate and discuss both policy and regulation in order to, as you would say, maximize the public interest and promote innovation and investment. As the leader of a small island developing state, I have a duty to maximize the public interest, and therefore my conversation with you on narrowing the digital divide must address the uncomfortable truths of social and global inequality and the role that I want to challenge you to play as leaders in this powerful sector. Yours must be a role driven by more than profits and must include the principle of social justice, especially for small nations, often invisible, regrettably, to many larger nations. It is perhaps fortuitous that your 51st annual conference as the IIC falls between three other global fora: the United Nations General Assembly, UNGA 76, which finished last week, or earlier this week I should say, UNCTAD 15, proudly hosted by us in Barbados, starting on Monday, a first, might I add, for a nation of our size, and of course, COP26, which will be held in Glasgow next month, and that conference will force us to address the reality of the climate crisis and its ravages. In a very real sense, we have said over and over, we need 1.5 degrees to survive. And this palpable reality is being magnified day by day in our island nations and indeed in the countries in the North Atlantic as well. The digital divide is a mirror of these global inequities that persist. So you might ask, how does this affect you and how does this affect the IIC? As regulators, you have a duty of care. Simply put, you must have a responsibility to develop frameworks that confront the digital divide rather than submit passively to it. And I'd like to suggest three ways in which you can act as easy as ABC. First, to adopt moral strategic leadership as part of your governance model. I've already asked for this at the global level, but I want to challenge you in this sector as well to ask yourselves that question. If you acknowledge that the top 5 largest tech companies in the world have a market capitalization of roughly $9.3 trillion, why cannot we achieve more equitable access to the digital space, especially at a time when our children have to gain their education online in the midst of this pandemic? Can we not use a percentage of that to provide each child with affordable access to a tablet, one that is rugged and one that is capable of not becoming obsolescent within 2 to 3 years? Building out the architecture for digitalization is only half of the equation. Access to it through connectivity and devices completes the process of inclusion for equality. And let us not forget, in some countries, there is the basic issue of access to electricity. My friends, that inclusion must therefore also move beyond lip service and include substantial changes to all that we do to ensure that people with disabilities have full access equally to the digital space to flourish, and not just our children. So consolidation, competition dynamics, and market concentration all require you to re-examine your business models and to analyze the policy and regulatory implications of those models. Are they still fit for purpose in a world that has been thrust into a state of flux in the past 2 years? The imperative to provide greater stewardship is not isolated to the pandemic or to any other single issue. The UN Global Compact asserted that the impact of the pandemic has starkly demonstrated that failure to address one crisis increases the magnitude and intensity of others. They report that while 77% of global media CEOs recognize the critical role that businesses could play in contributing to the delivery of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, only 13% of media CEOs believe that business is playing that role. At the same time, 59% of consumers surveyed said they will avoid brands that are not demonstrating progress against goals that impact their society and their planet. This, my friends, is clear evidence that our moral strategic leadership matters now more than ever and can change this trajectory, so that we call on you to remember this. Secondly, boost broadcast media's role in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Traditional broadcast media, especially radio, remains an important communication channel for many small island developing states such as mine. Despite the prevalence and popularity of social media, broadcast media should not resile from their duty to inform, educate, and yes, entertain. As the COVID-19 pandemic persists and new and troubling variants are discovered, people everywhere are relying as much as possible on credible news outlets for helpful information. The way media and entertainment are consumed and distributed has shifted radically over the past few years. The current landscape is being transformed by upended business models, content created by consumers, and ever-changing terms of reference in the era of digital disruption. With almost 3.8 billion people now online globally, the digital world offers significant benefits, but also poses the risk of harmful content. Equally, advancements in artificial intelligence and deep fakes, as they call it, mean that manipulated video representations of people produced by sophisticated artificial intelligence have only created additional challenges as the public struggles to separate truth from fiction. This is a real issue. And here is where IIC has an opportunity to form a new media ecosystem through stronger collaboration between the arms of IIC membership to tackle these risks successfully. Let me bring it closer to home with your members in the Caribbean and Latin America regions, both from industry and from regulatory authorities. Indeed, the chair of the IIC's Small Nations Regulator Forum is a Barbadian, Dr. Alison Leacock, from the Barbados Broadcasting Authority. Our media landscape as sovereign CARICOM states is not homogeneous, but diverse and constantly changing. In fact, creating a stronger media ecosystem across content creation, distribution, and consumption is essential for us across this region, as we do not fit neatly into a template, and our cultural realities, resources, and capacity are different. I therefore, my friends, want to suggest that increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the media and entertainment industry is the right thing to do, and it can increase profits. Analysis shows that ethics and profits are two sides of the same coin. There is financial logic to making sure that content and those who create it are authentically and inclusively representative of their society. For example, movies that lack authentic and inclusive representation underperform by around 20% of their budget at opening. You have the platform to showcase the communities you serve. 64% of consumers in a Google survey said that they had considered buying or making a purchase after seeing an ad that they considered diverse or inclusive. 64%. Similarly, other sectors have sizable untapped opportunities from increased diversity and inclusion. In sports, efforts to encourage greater participation among young people can lead to a more diverse pool of athletes and commentators in later life. To address this, the Australian government recently released Sport 2030, which is a comprehensive plan to increase youth sports participation of people with disabilities, people from culturally and linguistically diverse communities, and low to medium income households. What does all of this tell us? As broadcast media, do not forget that our communities have a story to tell. A greater emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusivity not only works well for consumers and works well with them, but also increases the diversity of talent, which can then lead to more representative storytelling. And indeed, good media is really about telling good stories. And thirdly, confront digital rights and freedoms as well as responsibilities. Our current systems seem designed to disempower too many. The concept of digital rights extends beyond the online realm and has implications across the entire social justice system in terms of how we can rectify the power imbalances that currently exist and provide more agency to those who may be victims of deepfakes and other digital harm to ensure that the redress provided to them is relevant and meaningful. I joined the call by Sheila Warren, Deputy Head of the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution at the World Economic Forum, for a new policy framework to effectively address issues of justice that arise in a range of digital contexts. Digital justice provides a space through which people can investigate community problems and generate solutions. In the face of several challenges, including those of jurisdiction and under-resourced legal and judicial systems, our lukewarm attempts at regulating international communications platforms have allowed technology-enabled harms to flourish. This is compounded by the fact that these systems falsely default to inadequate privacy-based protections, limited legal solutions, and a lack of fair process in automated decision-making. Most concerning is these systems currently fall short of protecting their citizens, particularly women and other historically marginalized communities. Providing individuals with robust pathways to recourse and redress should be vital aspects of how we must work together as organizations, as private sector, as governments, so that we can collectively contend with the ethics and governance of data-driven technologies. My friends, there is an opportunity to center digital transformation initiatives and system design around strengthening and protecting specific articulated rights. This kind of system would measure impact instead of just volume. Ultimately, we have a duty of care that we owe each other. And while the nature of business and the converged market have evolved in the digital era in a sense, little has changed. The concept of duties remain a useful tool and offers questions that allow people to define responsible governance in digital ecosystems. Cybersecurity and data governance frameworks must be the bridge to building a collaborative approach. Let me close by saying narrowing the digital divide is not an isolated effort, but a multidimensional issue. This has been the moment for media, for entertainment, and for platform companies to step up to their mission to inform, educate, and entertain. The current environment has undoubtedly accelerated trends that were in view 4 years ago. But more than that, what has come into sharper focus is the imperative to revisit long-held assumptions, to rebuild, redesign, and reprioritize to create a more trusted, prosperous, resilient, and equitable converged industry. It will widen the gulf between those who have embraced digital transformation and social responsibility and those who have not. Just as importantly, it is a test of leadership both at an industry level, where collective responsibility and accountability will set the industry on a firmer footing, and at an individual level, where the blueprint for industry leaders is evolving to encompass agility, impact, responsibility, and authenticity. Digital consumption is way, way up, and advertising is way, way down. Traditional media is under pressure, and trust, my friends, is under siege. Teams are collaborating remotely, companies are collaborating sporadically. Is the future business as usual, or can this be a catalyst for the industry to reset? The answer is ABC for BCC. Adopt moral, strategic leadership as part of your governance model. A. B. Boost broadcast media's role in diversity, equity, and inclusion. C. Confront digital rights and freedoms as well as responsibilities. This is about behavior change communication, BCC, and creating a stronger media ecosystem across content creation, distribution, and consumption to manage the transition in converged digital communications. My friends, summon the courage to do it, and let us make sure that we make this world a better place to live in. Thank you, and I wish you all successful consultations for this, your 51st annual conference. Thank you.